Welcome to the Unfinished podcast. Truth be told, we've never really learned how to deal with our unfinished business. In a society that's taught us to be put together, what do we do when our world falls apart? Most importantly, why does our world fall apart? See, right now we're living through the most significant transformation humanity has ever known. Knowing how to pick up our pens and write a renewed story has never been a more important conversation. So welcome to the podcast that interviews heroes that at some point had to start again and rise to glory.
Cole Gibson.
One of Australia's top 100 most influential women.
Love is always there.
The more love you give, the more you get it back.
We're all connected.
And that's unification. Chiyoko, welcome to our community. I'm super excited to introduce you to these guys. Some of them probably saw you speak at Global Unity Summit. So if you're live and you remember Chiyoko from that interview, please let her know what, the standout thing was. That I loved that interview that she left you with. And yeah, that went really deep into many different rabbit holes of perception. And that's probably my favorite interview actually of that whole summit. Just FYI.
I know you don't play favorites, but I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. I had so much fun doing that. And it was super organic. I mean, there were some moments in the questions you were asking, I just felt my, system come online and say, yes, this is what we need to lean into speaking about. So thank you for hosting that and everything else you host, Nicole. Thank you.
You know what? I just want to make a special announcement before we go into the podcast about an event that Chiyoko and I are organizing with an amazing group of people. I'm just going to take this opportunity right now to let you all know on 12/12 we are unifying 1 million people to meditate together. That's right, just like that, to create a miracle. And the miracle is to shift the quantum timeline of where humanity is heading from this point on, from 12/12 onward, and hopefully really just shift a timeline beyond what the world has been through over the past couple of years to a much brighter future for all of us. So please join that. I've put the link, register, tell your friends about it. Chiyoko is excitingly now working for HighVibe Network, who are our official partners. And that's a really exciting new chapter for you as well.
Indeed,
Speaking of quantum timelines, that's probably the best place to begin. What quantum timeline needed to shift in Chiyoko's world for her to end up working with FaZe at HighVibe?
Oh, I love that question. And it's funny you say a quantum timeline as if there's one. There were many timelines that had to shift and meld into place. And I'm so playful with, like life philosophy, spirituality, how we look at life, how we try and make sense as best we can of what is this world that we get to experience being human in. And I do feel there are multiple timelines, like infinite timeline possibilities that are all playing out. And whichever one our present consciousness is able to lean into is partly our own manifestation. And it's partly what is divinely in order. What karmic experiences am I meant to have right now? And what karmic experiences did I have that got me to this point? And it's been this incredible journey. And there's many things I could share about why HighVibe Network, why right now, why our mutual friend FaZe, who's become a really, really close friend of mine, and partner in crime at HighVibe Network. We're having a lot of fun working together. But I will say, I'll drop one nugget and we can go on whatever tangents we feel like. But
many.
I've had this appreciation recently in the past few months. So I engaged officially with HighVibe at the end of the summer. So just a few months ago. I've known FaZe for about 1.5 years. And as I've really leaned into this company and this work and everything that is, Web3 or blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFTs in the spirit of raising consciousness, we can talk about that too. How can this new technology allow us to contribute to the raising of consciousness? I've had this moment of reflection of honestly 20 years of my career. And I feel that there's moments and experiences that happened almost like confetti sprinkled over those 20 years. And some of them have come back to me, some things I haven't thought about since the year 2005 that I've remembered because of this work that I'm doing. And I feel that I'm pulling from all of these various experiences that are actually showing up in a way that I couldn't have predicted. And it's the blending of the emergence of technology, that evolution, and my own personal emergence of self-development, spirituality. And it's that intersection of tech and consciousness. So I think all the timelines of 20 years, right, had to happen. That's like my professional career length working. All those timelines had to happen in order to be ready for this moment to accept what I might call the next mission. You know, I thought I've been on plenty of missions before, but this one seems to be extra special, this next mission. And I get to hang out with you more often too, which is always a bonus.
I know, even monthly scheduled calls that can take us, you know, into many different timelines, possible timelines,
yes.
so that we can
so many.
evaluate. You know, there's a lot actually that I'd love to go into many directions, and we just shared. But one thing I often find myself thinking about in relation to timelines is, do you believe that there are an infinite amount of timelines available to us in any moment? Or if you're on a timeline, right, that requires a certain amount of, say, like energy and commitment, do you think that if you fall off that timeline, you can always make a comeback in this lifetime? Or do you think that there's like a sort of a level of dispensation that we're allowed, but if we kind of push it too far, that timeline becomes unavailable to us, you know, in this life? And I ask this because the theme of one of the last podcasts I did with Trent, his premise was there's always time for a comeback. As long as you're alive and breathing, there's always time for a comeback. But I contemplate this deeply about like specific trajectories of possibility. And can we fuck it up so much in our life that actually we lose the opportunity completely?
I feel it's a deep question, and it's one that I have actually pondered myself and had other just contemplative discussions, right, with friends about. And I feel that there's infinite possibility of all the various timelines that could play out. And I do feel that whatever your right experience is meant to be in this very moment is the one that you're going to have. Somehow, whatever you're energetically vibing and putting out there, you're attracting the experience that's going to give you that next lesson. I also believe that there is, call it an ascension of consciousness, a raising of consciousness, that throughout this one singular lifetime, you know, we as humans are wired for goodness, and we're wired for compassion, and we are wired to feel our humanity and this unity, this oneness of the human species. And I think all of our paths are going in that direction. We're just in very different vehicles. You know, it's like there's so many different paths up the mountain, so to speak. And if you fall off your path and say you tumble down and you get yourself so banged up and scraped up, you're like, oh my God, my life is now over. It's fucked. It's done. Am I allowed to swear? I shouldn't do that. Probably not.
I think I've already said like 3 times. So please.
Did you? Okay, good. I can be colorful with like my expression. And so it is. And I get you know, into these conversations. So I have had moments where it's the absolute depths of despair from my personal existence, my perception, because we all are in our own reality. My depths of despair is not the next guy's depths of despair, the next woman's, right? It's all relative to our own life. And I feel that is a moment I probably needed for some kind of spiritual lesson, self-development, growth, maturity. And yes, I've watched myself and I've watched other people. You get back on the horse, you get back on the path, but the path is probably different than what you thought it was going to be. And that's the biggest thing. I do not think we have an ability to predict our path. And I'll drop one easy nugget that I think 50% of Americans can relate to. I got married when I was 29 and I got divorced when I was 32. Never did I think when I was 29 getting married that was going to happen 3 years later. That is not the path I anticipated. And that was a moment of like, oh my God, like everything has fallen apart. Everything has crumbled. I look back at that. That was actually over 10 years ago. It was 11 years ago that happened. And thank God it did. I never could have predicted like the amount of growth that I got from that, like the new person I transformed into being. So I don't think it's possible to fuck it up so bad that there's a point of no return. I think things can get super, super hard, and it's up to each person. The only thing we really have control of is how we show up in every moment. with what attitude and what energy are we putting out there? We can't control our circumstances, that's for sure. We can't control other people, that is for sure,
Right.
for sure.
We
But we
can
can
really
control our attitude. Yeah. And it doesn't
Yep.
mean being, Pollyanna 100% positive all the time. That's not having the human experience. The human experience is a range of emotion. It's the highest of highs and lowest of lows. Like that is the beauty and the horror of this human existence that we have. So feel that range. And then at some point, I think we even out, especially if you've been doing your work and your meditation, we even out and realize this happened for me, not to me.
Mm. I just think that this is such a valuable thing to be speaking about specifically right now. And it actually speaks to a deep part of the intention of wanting to create a podcast specifically on these unfinished moments, because when you think about what the world is going through, right, I think there's a lot of focus on these areas that have left people feeling incomplete, unfinished, the loss of a business, the changes to our lifestyle, a whole sort of myriad and range of different things, the amount of divisiveness politically, economically, that is really unpredictable and tumultuous. But what I'm really wanting to get to, and I'm trying to sort of approach this interview series with an open mind, because I'm an optimist, I'm a realist, but I'm also an optimist, and I like to naturally default to the possibility and the opportunity. So I'm trying as well through each episode and conversation to really get to some consensus around whether or not within what we've been through as a world, actually therein lies one of the greatest opportunities we truly have, which is how I feel, to awaken and shift and transform. And whatever timeline you thought you were on with your life pre-COVID, actually what else could there be from here on in for all of us individually and collectively?
There's a lot there, and I think this is such a valuable conversation to be having right now, and I love that you're hosting it and getting started and having some of our community come in and speak the perspectives, because there's a few things I could comment on. One is that I don't think there's ever going to be one unifying answer of, is this the time for X or is it the time for Y? Is there even any hope? Is there all the hope in the world? I think also the beauty of being human is that we have different opinions and perspectives, mostly from our own life experiences, our own biases, our own social conditioning, and whatever stuff we're working through right now. I mean, my answer to this question would be very different 10 years ago than it is right now. And so what's sort of like the medley when you meld together all of our perspectives, so mine in particular is that I do think this is possibly one of the most incredible and largest potential moments, inflection points for humanity to be able to rise up and above and beyond how we have been behaving and engaging with each other as a species.
Like, how is it really going to happen any other way? Let's just for a second, let's think about life in 2019, which, by the way, feels like decades ago. Can you just think
Completely.
back to just, I can't even remember what the world felt like in 2019. But whatever that was, however we were living our lives, going about our life, not expecting this pandemic to shut down the world, right? What would it actually have taken for the world to stop, reflect, and hopefully reset and create a grand awakening of sorts? It was going to have to be something that rattled the very nature of how we exist. I
think that is the only answer, because by sheer evidence of what life was like in 2019, nothing was changing. And I know there's a lot of innovation and there's a lot of social impact work happening and conscious entrepreneurs. I really recognize and admire all these things, but in general, we are existing, it still are, and it's just come to this, again, inflection point of recognition, existing in a very game A world, when I know we're playing for the game B. And if your audience is familiar, with this kind of philosophy or perspective on game A versus game B, we can chat about that. But in this kind of like winner take all capitalist mentality, greed and corruption, that is just the dominant force it wasn't changing. And guess what? That housing crisis of 2008 to 2009, I watched the movie The Big Short again, like actually just like a month ago or something. I felt like watching it again. And it is jarring how normal all of that was. It was just normal behavior. All of that corruption.
Were you living in New York, like in the thick of it at that time?
That was the peak of my game A life. Yes, was 2008, 2009.
Like
I got married.
We should call that the game B life. You know what I mean? Like I'm not sure we should call that the game A list. So that you were at the peak of
I was at the peak of that moment in my life. Yeah, I was. And maybe we'll talk about, so game A versus game B is a particular philosophy that's been written about and discussed amongst, I would say, intellectuals, like futurist thinkers, like think tank type thinkers, who are trying to make sense of what is so wrong in the world right now and how fragile is all of our society, our economy, our government. Like, how have we kind of painted ourselves into a corner of humanity? And a lot of it does come from like this game A just mean like this is the existence, and game B is a way more equitable existence, according to this like one philosophy. And it's pretty fascinating to listen to some people speak about it. And in game B, that is the infinite game, meaning that the human species can continue because there is enough resources on this planet to be able to sustain everybody. The issue is how it exists right now is that it's held, the power and the resources, in the hands of very, very few, and that number is becoming fewer and fewer. So in order to shift from game A to game B, there are bridges and tunnels that need to be built. And I feel the work that you're doing, that I'm doing, and our community and our peers and colleagues who are in this, in it to win it, to get to this game B place where there is more equality and education is easier to come by for all, and people can live sustainable lifestyles where we are not so extractive and damaging, to this planet. So that's just a synopsis of game A to game B. And I believe, as much as we're working, I know you work tirelessly on the things that you're passionate about, bringing these messages out to your communities and speaking, and this is your work. Like, this is what you're here to be doing. My opinion is, being friends with you and watching you, I feel like you're on your soul's mission. You're showing up and doing what you're meant to do right now. And it is exhausting and it is a lot of work, but we believe that it's worth it. It's worth the shot and the chance. Are we guaranteed, one, that it's actually going to work? No. And two, that it's going to look like what we think it's going to look like right now. We don't actually know what it's going to look like when there actually is more economic, equality for all.
So, and we might not, it might happen, but we might not live to see it happen. And I think that,
yes.
Like, this is something I really reflect on a lot in leadership. One of what I believe needs to be one of the most pivotal kind of shifts in perspective of what it means to be a leader in our world right now is leaders that are truly willing to give their life to a legacy that they might not get to, experience or enjoy. And what for me, and I'm sure you and I know Faze feels the same, I guess all of us in our own ways that are in this sort of space together, it comes naturally to work towards something that big and that great, even if we don't get to reap the reward, so to speak. But for someone that maybe has never considered even the concept of giving their life, entirely to something at all, what are the psychological leaps you feel? And maybe you can reflect on, your game A life. What were the psychological leaps that you needed to jump through? I actually call them psychological barriers. What are the barriers that you need to challenge and actually go up against, which is extremely painful when you think about these frames that we see life through, to really challenge those psychological barriers, to change your mindset, which then will create, an intrinsic willingness, I think, to run a business that isn't just profit at all costs, or be more altruistic, even in your, personal relationships, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think it's such an important conversation to give, one, encouragement and support, and the feeling of you're not alone, to anybody who's listening to this. As you were speaking, I was just thinking, if anyone is listening to this right now, they're curious, right? There's a lot of other things you could watch on Facebook and YouTube or whatever. someone is watching this and curiously seeking or considering how they might be on their own path. Maybe they're already on their path in their journey of self-development, spiritual awakening, whatever that is. And maybe they're looking to get further, or maybe they're looking to get started. And for me, my journey, there's so many psychological barriers. I'm like, where to even begin with all of them? I will say the biggest one that applies to so many different aspects that I was feeling at the time of my transition when I was exactly 30 years old. It wasn't like I turned 30 and decided to have a radical spiritual awakening. That just was the timing that it was, right? I didn't like put it in my calendar. Fear.
At 30, I better really consider what I want to be dedicating my life to.
Yeah. I just sort of, and throw out my entire life that I had spent, 8 to 10 years building, thinking everything was going exactly how I wanted it to go. So for just a bit of context, I worked for the first 10 years of my career in the fashion industry in New York City. And I worked in branding and marketing and advertising. And I spent 6 years at Calvin Klein. And I was there when e-commerce was invented. Literally, it was not a thing in 2004. And then it was everything in 2005 and 2006. So I was there at the birth of that technological, uprising.
I
And
feel
then
like
I
we
worked
would
at
have really gotten into a lot of mischief if we had been friends. Then I feel like that would have been.
Oh, so much. Nicole, I feel
Very
like we've been in mischief so many lifetimes that we like kind of passed that in this lifetime. We just jumped
Yeah.
straight to this
Be
moment.
conscious about it. Yeah.
Completely. This is our mischief now, right? There was a time. And then the last 2 years of my fashion industry career were spent at Alexander Wang. So I was the CMO of this, at the time, incredibly hot company. He still is a really big brand. Yeah. And it was such a big deal. And this was everything. It was absolutely everything. And I was married to a really nice guy, and he worked at a hedge fund. So I was really, really rocking that New York cliche of chicken fashion guy in finance, all the friends you could imagine, and going to the nightclubs and the parties and the restaurants. And, that was about the time that I was 30. And my going to a yoga studio at the demand of a friend of mine, beginning my yoga practice in the deep philosophical yoga philosophy study shifted something in me. And then the actual physical practice shifted something. And that introduced me to a meditation practice. And within a few months, I had this realization. It was like a veil was lifted, or it was like a fog lifted from my brain to actually see the life that I was living. One, the things that I was doing.
A moment where it just became illuminated to you, or was it slow progression of it, something that you sort of tried to resist seeing as it started to come to the surface, or was it like full kind of samadhi awakening moment?
Yep. I'd say it was like a slow burn samadhi moment.
Okay.
It was like a slow burn. There wasn't one singular incident that happened, right? Some people ask that, like, was it a fashion week moment, or was it a husband wife moment? Did something happen? But it happened very quickly. I would say within a 1 month period of me going to that first yoga class and then taking a bunch of workshops. Like when I get like obsessively interested in something, I go down the rabbit hole and I go fast and deep and hard. And I just was needing to understand, like Buddhist philosophy and yoga philosophy. And I was almost living this like out of body experience day to day, and shuffling to my desk at work and showing up for these pretty important meetings, in that industry, at that company. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal when you have meetings with Vogue and you have Fashion Week around the corner and you're getting the run of show ready. I mean, this was a big deal. And the things that my husband and I were doing, like that was our life. We had a lot of friends, we traveled, we did cool things. And then I just started seeing almost like I was looking outside of this like fishbowl, like my whole life was in this fishbowl. And I took this 10,000 foot view outside of it. And I realized I was not proud of the things that I was doing. And I also wasn't actually happy. I wasn't satisfied. And that's something that in hindsight, I felt it for such a long time, but I thought that's as good as life gets. I didn't think you got any happier than that, because I had all of these things. I had a career, I had a husband, we had a fancy apartment on Park Avenue, and I had a lot of friends, and I had a great family too. There's definitely some wholesome things in my life, and I wasn't happy. And I thought, well, this is just how everybody is. No one's happy. No one likes their job. Everyone, we're just working to make a buck. But thank God that's what drinking is for, and that's how I was just living life. Seriously.
So
yeah.
bring us into that a little bit more, because I wonder if there's anyone listening that maybe is relating to this. I would say that there probably is. What to realize I don't feel proud, because it's quite a big realization thinking about where you are. I don't actually feel proud of my life or what I'm doing. What was that awareness? Like, what did that mean to you in that moment? Was it that you realized you were, positively contributing to the world? Was it that you felt, the environment you were in socially, what was too kind of inauthentic or competitive? Like, what did that mean to Chiyoko at that point in your life?
Yeah. For me, one of the most, you just brought back this memory, one of the most powerful lessons I learned very early on with this yoga philosophy. And I will mention the studio and yoga school I was going to. It's called the Jivamukti Yoga. And if you're in the yoga community or you're familiar, it's pretty well known, internationally. It's been around for 40 years. And so Jivamukti Yoga, one of the founders was speaking at one of the many lectures I was going to. And she was describing what being of service means. And I'd heard those words before, but that didn't really mean anything to me. And I actually did volunteer work. I was actually trying to make my soul feel anything good. And I'd been doing some volunteer work for years, in the city at some, anyways. And so I was trying, and I thought, oh, that's being of service, do some volunteer work on twice a month, every other weekend. And then what I learned was that being of service is, what is your contribution of your life force energy that you can contribute that is actually for the betterment of other people, that's not yourself. And outside of my volunteer work, which was very nice that I did that, there was nothing that I was doing for the betterment of other people. In fact, I went as far as to analyze my own life in the fashion industry and think, interesting, I am working tremendously long hours, working my ass off to make women feel that their sense of self-worth has to come from carrying a $2,000 handbag that they had to go into credit card debt to get, because what's most important is other people's perception of you because you carry that handbag. And by the way, you better be anorexically thin, because that's the only thing that's going to make you beautiful. I was working tirelessly. I was working 80 hours a week as a head of marketing, CMO role, hiring models that were not healthy at all. And I'll bite my tongue a bit and just say they were extremely unhealthy, and pouring the companies not just tens of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars into advertising campaigns that perpetuates this image that I think is actually so harmful, especially to young girls and young women, as they try to figure out what's their sense of value, of self-esteem, and what is beauty. And so that was one of, I guess maybe you're asking me, was there one moment? I think I had that aha moment when I just looked at my life, some journaling exercise and some workshop I'm in, of how am I of service? I'm well, I don't have anything to write, but how am I not of service? I felt that I was actually harming. I was putting more harm out in the world than I was helping anything.
Thank you for sharing this realization, because I think it's especially important that people do share these moments, especially those who have gone on to turn that unfinished business into something, incredibly positive and change their life. And I think it's probably not said enough that changing your life is really fucking hard. It's not an easy, it's not, especially when you have what you maybe still do or previously thought was everything, so there's so much identity that is tied up in that, and you're essentially dying. It is a death. You've got to let go of so much, and the fear of not knowing who you're going to be on the other side of that, one of the most terrifying, I think, that any human can go through, because we need a sense of placement in the world. Without a sense of placement, what is the world? Who are we? Where do I fit? Where do I belong? Everything becomes so difficult and painful to navigate. Without that,
I do.
But
well, I want to comment on that, because you're reminding me of a question that I didn't quite answer. I got caught up in my own backstory here. So continue your thought, and then I want to come back to some of the psychological barriers that in hindsight, I massively struggled with. So yeah.
Well, this is sort of where I was going with this. It's what did you really have to face, is my question. Because as soon as we become present to something that we're not proud of, especially, and in some ways I can really see, where you must have been, and know you enough to relate in some ways, like the perfectionist, the high achiever. It is so painful to look at any aspect of self that could evoke shame, or not enoughness. And in my journey, I spent I thought that I'd dealt with all of that. I don't know, like, if you know my backstory, but I in theater and acting through my teenage years, was very involved in that industry and had anorexia for 5 years. And so I really understand what that battle is. And when I changed my life for the better and realized actually my life needs to be more than this, I didn't also realize the amount of defensiveness I still had around certain aspects of self that would show mostly for me in personal relationships, when someone I loved tried to challenge me, and the feeling of inadequacy or the feeling of shame was so overwhelming that I just couldn't be present with it. And so I would have defensiveness, and I think a lot of the world, like, think about the world right now and how gripped people are to their point of view. And this is really what is underneath. When you start like reeling back the layers, what you're speaking to is what's underneath. It's that defensiveness, that intensity around your point of view of the world is something in you that you cannot be present with and reflect on, which is causing this overbearing sense of I am right and this is right, And so I think it's a really valuable thing to explore. So I'd love to hear your kind of journey through that.
I love all of that, and there's so much there. We might need a couple more hours for our podcast conversation here. There's so much there. And I love this, especially because I haven't told these stories in a while. It's been, I don't know, months or maybe even a year since I've had this kind of dialogue with somebody. And as you're speaking, I'm having all these pops of memory, and they're visceral. And I'm thinking, gosh, this was 10 years ago for me. And I can actually feel that fear moment. I was just remembering this kind of, cocktail party, friend's birthday that I was at, and this petrifying feeling of not wanting to go because I didn't know what to tell people I was doing with my life. I was the girl who left the fashion industry. I was the girl who threw it all away. I was the girl who divorced like this really nice guy, this like handsome, fella that we were gonna do life with.
That compliment, by the way, when anyone says, yeah, they were really nice. It really just says so much about where you were at.
It's the elegance. That is the best description. Just nice, very nice. Whole separate podcast of relationships we've been through.
Are you with someone nice?
Right, exactly. How to confront the fact that you're with somebody nice. So underneath all the fear, because there's fear of so many different things, right? And I can rattle them off, but I will touch on something that you said or pull the thread at this. It's the own personal insecurity. It's not actually the fear of what people are gossiping about. It's not actually the fear of being financially destitute and dying under a bridge in squalor with like no food or something. Like I could move in with my parents if I really needed to at 30 something years old. Like
the reality is not as bad as the insecurity makes us feel, but it's
100%.
It's how you feel you're being seen, in that, and also how you see yourself. I think like are you able to actually accept that there is a possibility that could happen and still maintain your sense of self-worth and who you are?
Yeah. The things I learned is that nobody was gossiping about me as much as I thought that they were. Everyone is so self-absorbed and narcissistic in their own way that they are so concerned with their own life and their own shit and drama they're going through that maybe they'd be like, oh yeah, is she working and doing that, or is she doing that? Anyway, and they move on. And meanwhile, I was almost paralyzed with this insecurity of losing an identity, going back to the perfectionism and climbing this career ladder and getting all these things and being judged for my decisions around the divorce and around the career change, and doing those both simultaneously. And I also, but it was I would say it was 80% made up in my head, 20% a thing, you know, it kind of answering people's questions again and again of like, so what are you doing? And where is the career going to be? You know, it was 80% in my head. And I think that right there is such a crux. And I speak very much from like a privileged first world experience, you know, as you and I both are, and as many people listening to this would be, you know, I'm speaking from a Western experience, you know, I'm American, having the New York City life. It's a very privileged life. Even when I left my 6-figure salary to go hack it at an entrepreneurial career in the health, wellness, mindfulness, meditation, you know, industry, or that space, I still had so much more than the vast majority of people on this planet. And it is these made up stories where we feel so scared that we're going to be left with nothing. And it's this insecurity that we get. And I bet a lot of it is from childhood. It's like for each person to kind of think back, well, what were the things that you were rewarded for in childhood, and what were you punished for in childhood? And for me, growing up, you know, if I affectionately call my Japanese tiger mom that I had, she's full Japanese, and there is a lot of that, you know, classic characteristics. And now you I feel like you just got a deeper insight into me. Nicole.
I really did. That's
like, I just saw like 3 light bulbs go off above your head right there, because we've worked together too. And so what is success? How was I conditioned, right? Both DNA wise, like literally biologically, like the Japanese, like every culture has its, you know, certain characteristic traits that are very strong, and like the discipline, the work ethic, like that's genetic in my heritage. And also it is how I was raised. It was school, and it was, you know, being punctual, and it was getting the job and like getting that promotion. I was so conditioned to feel that that is the only way you can be successful in life, and somehow that was going to equal happiness. And so all my yoga studying and philosophy and deep meditation retreats I was doing, I knew it wasn't true. And yet I was paralyzed with fear to act upon these aha, you know, realizations that I'm like, those are old storylines that aren't true. And yet I was still pretty darn paralyzed. And I don't know if you're going to ask me eventually, so like, what's the moral and how'd you get through it? We can get to that eventually next, but you know, it's just that there's so many psychological barriers, and everything I think happened in the right time, the way it was supposed to, kind of what we're speaking at the beginning of this conversation. If I could go back and do anything, I would spend so much less time worrying about what other people were thinking or saying about me. And it wasn't even that bad what they were saying or thinking or gossiping, you know, in social circle or industry circle. The amount of brain cells that were expended worrying about this, but that's for me personally, because everything, there's so much that was ingrained in me about, you know, your persona and how you're perceived, and having this kind of perfectionism thing. And I still work on that. You know, it's not as bad. God, if you only met me 10 years ago. But, you know, we all have these core wounds that during times of deepest transition, standing at the edge of that cliff, not knowing if you want to make the leap into, you know, greatness, we hold ourselves back because we don't think we're enough. We don't think that we're going to be able to make it. And it's more secure to stay unhappy but safe than the potential of being so much happier, but it's not known what that's going to look like.
Yeah, 100%. It's my curiosity with a person is always, as a facilitator, you know, when I've been holding space for these processes in people, which is like the most amazing kind of thing to witness when someone's actually coming up against that fear and you're seeing it arise live, you know. And it's given me so much love and respect for the human experience, you know, because it's we all have these edges, all of us, like even
I think that's the point of life, right? And this is where I get like myself in these like deep philosophical rabbit holes. It's like we're meant to be challenged. We're meant to break down like a snake shedding its skin. Like we're not meant to wear the same skin for 85 years of our life. Like we're meant to go through these birth cycles and death cycles of becoming the next version of ourselves. And it's not pretty. Like, that's the yin and the yang. It's the light and the dark. And it's a constant cycle of going through it, and not to think like, oh, because it's feeling super dark right now, like you're doing something wrong or bad. It's like, congratulations, you're having the human experience. This is what your soul signed up for, and you're on the roller coaster ride. It is just a roller coaster ride. That's it.
Yeah, I really hope that people are listening to what you're saying right now, because there is so much expectation. And again, like, there's a whole nother sort of topic in and of itself. Why is there so much expectation that unless change can happen in this really sort of sequential, beautiful, perfect way, then it's wrong, you know? Whereas, like, where did that even come from? Because when you look at change and transformation in nature, it is super destructive, like, which is also the creative process. There's always an equal amount of destruction as there is refertilization. And you know, we're meant to go through those initiations and cycles. But I think, like, because of industries like marketing and fashion, and now, you know, media and social media, because we're constantly being exposed to an end result. This is my hypothesis, at least. We're constantly being exposed to an end result, and we've also, for the most part, now live lives with a culture of convenience. So everything is on demand, you know, like, we don't even have to wait for the next Simpsons episode anymore. Remember when you're like, you know,
Thursday night.
You know,
exactly. If you missed the show at 8 p.m. on Thursday, you missed it forever. You never see it. For the summer, when the reruns, the summer comes.
That's right. But that's so beautiful, because there was an anticipation. And I think, like, we see this in so many areas of life now, like even love, like people, I'm passionate about this, like seeing other people as disposable, like not wanting to put in the effort. Unless someone can give you everything now, then, you know, there's always someone else that's going to be willing to. Like, what the fuck kind of attitude is there? But when you really break these cultures down, and because we're also existing now in an echo chamber of technology that is constantly reinforcing our confirmation bias, which feeds this idea that, you know, I am entitled to what I want when I want it. You could be an amazing person and still fall, you know, victim to this, because it's programming, you know, that I think you can't live in Western society without being affected by it in some way. But the deeper implications of these cultures, I think, develops as this inability to be present with the chaos and messiness and imperfection of and hardship, the truth of the hardship, you know, and being a beginner at something. And when we go through these change cycles, that was something I really had to overcome in myself, like, because speaking was something that I was always quite naturally good at. So to not just consistently see myself and lean on that, you know, and see myself only as that, was challenging, because to be a writer, I had to start again. To be an entrepreneur, I had to start again. I had to be shit at it first. You know, I had to make a lot of mistakes and be in the parts that were really uncomfortable in order to get good at it. But I'm so happy that I've had that kind of willingness throughout my life, because the reward is an ability to hold a lot of responsibility, you know, and to meet the edges of myself, which is really where I think the richest riches come from in life. It's never the superficial things.
I agree on all fronts. Everything you just said, I totally agree. And I want to speak to even just most recently going full circle with my joining HighVibe Network officially at the end of the summer. After hearing my story, for anyone who's been listening, you think like, oh gosh, you know, 10 years later, phew, she probably made it. No, I still break it down and start all over again, but I carry with me a backpack with all of my life experiences, 20 years of all these things that I'm like, God, I now know why that thing happened. I knew it was like a big deal in the moment 10 years ago, working at this company, doing this thing, but now I'm realizing the perspective that I have. And I am working for a company that is based in Web3. And I want to speak about that in 1 minute. I'm putting a pin in it mentally here. And something I've thought of twice and I've forgotten to say that I just feel would be so valuable to anybody listening. And I heard it myself, and it was so valuable to me, is if you are looking to transition, if you're struggling to make change, you desire, but you are afraid, you have insecurity, any of these things that we've been speaking about, surround yourself with people who support the development of who you want to become. That's it. And I had to do this, what I call the 80-20 flip, when I did this self-assessment through this nutrition school that I was going through. Part of my career change was leaving fashion, getting into holistic health and nutrition. And it was a lot about mind, body, spirit, functional medicine, integrative medicine, wellness. And so on the spirit side, you did an assessment, like an inventory of who are the people who you spend the most time with or influence you, the most, that you see or talk on the phone with. And I realized 80% of the people who I spent the most time with did not support the version of myself that I could feel emerging with Bambi legs, really wobbly and uncertain and not knowing where life is going. Only 20% of the people got that or were supportive. Or if they didn't get it, they still were encouraging of me to go out and do something different. They weren't letting their own insecurities and their own judgment get in their way of me pursuing going on a radically different path they were doing. They weren't projecting their own shit on me and my transition because they weren't making the transition themselves. And I shifted that, and the yoga community helped tremendously. We were seeking, and these are people, and that kind of energetics, that vibration of other humans who you listen to on the phone, you talk to on Zoom, you hang out with, and you hug physically. Make sure you are surrounded by people who are matching the frequency that you want to be operating at. Too many negative Nellies and naysayers. It's going to hold you back, and you're going to struggle. It's like, why make the struggle so much harder? And it doesn't mean you have to completely cut people out of your life. Let's not be too harsh or too dramatic here, but there might be a shift in how much time you spend with them and also what topics you engage with them. If there's trigger conversations with the mother-in-law, whatever it might be, you know what? It's probably not worth your energy. Your energy output is better spent elsewhere, pursuing your own curiosity and your seeking. So those whom we are a product of whom we surround ourselves with. I do believe that. And I'll pause there before getting into the yet again birth cycle that I'm going through with learning a completely different industry. And just see, I would imagine, you've had your own experiences, Nicole, with the people who you surround yourself with.
Yeah, I mean, of course. For me, it's always presence, awareness. I think I'm at a point, thank goodness, where I'm really accepting of the path of growth. I've shed the idea that I'm meant to be really good at something quickly, and I've shed the idea that I'm meant to do it all myself. That's just not really a part of my frame. But I remember that struggle when that was a part of my frame. But being at this point where I guess it's it is the cliche, you really are just here for the journey. Every day it's just an adventure and a journey, and the more that I can love that and be present with that and nurture the people that are in it with me, the allies, not my competition, my allies, and really love them, understand them. I think that is probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my entrepreneurial journey over the past 12 months. It's really taking the time more so to understand the people around me and the people that are my allies, because then the grace that can exist with the facilitation of greater mission, when you just eliminate the ego and you can really be present with that and have a mindset of givingness, everything's so much lighter, because it's you can be doing what you're good at more and more and more. I mean, that's the aim. You're probably not going to be good at it at the beginning, but as you learn and see your path and see where you really can contribute, be strong and confident in that, and bring in create opportunities. Now, one of my favorite things to do as a CEO and an entrepreneur is to create opportunity for others. I used to be very, very focused on community, and I still am, but I would say probably even more so, because I'm still in the community, but I'm also responsible now for a big team. My even more favorite thing to do is to create opportunities for people and to create an environment, knowing that someone that's collaborating with our team, or someone especially that's in my team, they get to be a part of our culture. That they could be working for any other organization in the world, And this is a human being that is coming to work every day to be a part of something that you've been sort of fundamental in creating. It just kind of blows me away how amazing that is. And to really fall in love with that has made like such a substantial difference, because that process of communication and feedback too, with that the ability to listen and understand how they see things and where they want to take the vision, and this constant iteration, it's really fun. Like it can be really, really fun. It doesn't have to be stressful. It's always a process of getting better and more effective, but not in a way that feels stressful or heavy, just in a way that feels like growth, consistent growth together.
Yeah. I love that. That last little part too, especially just popped to mind for me of how we can be happy. That's one thing, right? And how we can find consistent joy. It's almost like, what's the blended average, day to day? Like, where's your joy barometer at? You kind of like riding here, or you riding here, or you riding down here? Like, what's the blended average? We have happy moments, sad moments, fearful moments, joyful moments, whatever they are. But what's your consistent baseline of average of everything? And I think so much of our struggles happen when we think the experience should be anything other than what it is right now.
Totally.
And even with team members, right? I've worked at so many different companies. I've been a founder of more than one company. I've worked with many people, many different office situations. And I still sometimes find this struggle, or I think back over the years of like getting so frustrated with like, we can't find the right person to work in this role, or it's such a struggle that, be handling all this stuff we don't want to. There's a reason why it's happening. There's a reason why, and to let go of this, like, oh, it shouldn't happen like this, or this should be a lot easier. It's like, well, it's not. And if you want it to be, well, then you can work towards optimizing in the weeks and months ahead to make this less of a struggle point. But right now it's a struggle point because it has to actually identify something that needs to be addressed. You need to shift the team or shift the project or whatever it is. I used to fall into this trap of like thinking that I was doing something so wrong that it all wasn't easy. And it's like, wait, when was anything ever easy? Like, when was that the guaranteed narrative? It's like, it's a process. There's such process. And when you were speaking, I could hear the joy as you were describing the home that you're creating for your team, as a CEO, as a leader, and almost this like, feminine nurturing, but CEO and leadership role of this really family. And I know you feel the same with like, your friends and community and people who you work with. These aren't just employees. This is a family that really believes in a unified North Star mission. And so you as the leader role, it's like, how are you taking care of the family, and how are you creating the ohana? Ohana is a Hawaiian word that means either tribe, family that's not just blood family, but it's like the tight-knit community where there's just such trust. And when you can create trust amongst team members, and when you can lead by example for doing that, I know I have changed people's lives who have worked for me, and even just how I've shown up and how I've been honest about my own struggles. I've taken responsibilities for some like bad decision making that I've made along the way. It's like how we show up as a person and how we lead by example, that will impact your team members' lives for the long haul. And I think I can tell with what like responsibility you were holding that, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's joy for you, for right now. Like, this is the moment, the experience that's meant to be happening at this period of life for you.
Yeah, I just got like emotional in hearing that reflected back, because it is I think the emotion is, I wish every leader would access that, because I think a lot of leaders, especially visionaries, and maybe I'm speaking to one right now, who's listening to this podcast, that used to be me. I had to go through like losing a team that I loved very much to learn this lesson, which was excruciatingly painful, because I was so fixed on the vision at any cost,
Yeah.
And the dark side of that is people become commodities, and people become pieces of the puzzle. And not because you're a bad person, but as a visionary, you see the picture. I see the picture so clearly. So to come back from that, and what you don't understand as a visionary is other people are not seeing the picture as clearly as you.
Yes.
So when you are speaking only to that picture and not trying to understand how they see things, they're experiencing that as pressure. They're experiencing it as a lack of acknowledgement, dismissal. They feel inadequate. They feel not intelligent enough, because it's not a fair way to lead. You need to never lose sight of that vision. But what I've learned is to really find that joy in receiving someone where they are in their life, and exactly as you just shared, like, do all that you can to empower them. That's it's a feeling like no other feeling. Like it doesn't even compare to speaking on stages in front of 5,000 people. It's just it is one of the best feelings in the world, because you have an opportunity as a leader. What you say has impact, and I've had to learn that too. I didn't get that something I could say in passing, someone in my team might think about that for days or weeks. Because you're managing so much all the time, and no one's ever going to be perfect. I'm not perfect at this at all, but I've really tried to become more present and develop a culture where I learn what someone loves. I learn what they don't love so much, and I'm just helping them feel seen in that. And what I've found too is your team will meet you halfway. Like if you can endeavor to help them feel noticed and seen and acknowledged and loved, they will be way more willing to go that extra mile for you. And I think that is an incredibly beautiful thing too, because that exchange and there's an understanding. Whereas like old me would have been like, I need the updated deck, by this afternoon, and I would have given no context, rather than actually taking the time to be like, hey, I know you have a lot on your plate. You've already communicated with me that you don't, X, Y, and Z. I have a meeting coming up that this could be really an amazing opportunity for all of us. Take that time to let them understand you get how it makes them feel to have to go that extra mile. And 9 times out of 10, my team will meet me in that and feel a sense of accomplishment rather than strain. And I think that is a powerful lesson, for me, that I've learned in leadership over the past 12 months.
Yeah, it's really great. I think it's interesting. I don't know what the right phrase is. It's not just compassionate leadership. There's something more evolved. There's some word that is just, it's a new way of engaging at a human level, which should be common sense, but the opposite was happening for all these decades of, especially the growth of these fast-paced entrepreneurial companies, especially in tech, and that like now, totally loathed phrase, move fast and break things. Well, you break people. That's what it was doing. It was breaking a lot of people. It was breaking their spirit. And it was just this game A measuring stick. Again, going back to like, how can we make the most money, get investors the most money? Well, we break people. That's how we do it. What? You fucking kidding me?
Let's really get real. Why? Because I would argue that 99% of the time, the reason that exists is because you as the leader feel inadequate, and you're projecting that inadequacy onto all of these people that have entrusted you with their life and their time and their passion. And that's a really fucking important thing to reflect on, because it's not all about you, and I think that sometimes when the pressure is on you in leadership, you don't actually realize how you are making it all about you, because you think you're making it all about the thing that you're working on. But that way of being is, I think, a very kind of self-oriented, I wouldn't say selfish because the intention's not always there, but self-oriented way of being.
I agree. And I think it's this vicious cycle, because it is the founder, let's just say, for example, it's the founders' own like drive from their own demons that are needing them to like scale at such speed. However, they've also taken investors' money. Let's say theoretically they're in their Series A going into a Series B. There's $100 million investment happening. They actually have real investors to answer to. So now it's like the investors and their money are breathing down this founder's neck, encouraging, fanning the flames of his own demons that were driving him in the first place to scale something so quickly. And that is, all of venture capital is not bad, but it perpetuates this, like,
it is the culture of that, for sure.
it's a race, and it's a winner take all, and like you just have to get the largest, engaged consumers, audience, dollars, sales, and it all has to happen yesterday. And if there was a way of slowing down, it's almost like society and technology and industry has sped up so quickly. We became our own worst enemy. We have the most unhealthy, work lifestyle situation. And I guess I'll reference pre-COVID because it's just all sorts of whacked now with the work from home shifts, and cultures like all shifted in the past, 18 months for sure. But even the point leading up to the pandemic, the way people were working, the rate of burnout. I mean, you are an expert in the wellness and mental health industry. Never have people been more damaged because of their careers, and relationships been damaged too. It's just it's a very toxic, cyclical, cyclical, going round and round this merry-go-round until, like you said, something had to break in order to shake things up and say, hey, let's take a harsh look at how we were existing before. And a lot of it was sucky, and we had our blinders on, our heads in the sand, telling ourselves that we were doing these things to benefit our company, our own paychecks. And it was so unhealthy. And now how can we actually go about doing this better? Let's find a better way. Let's do the hard thing and build something better.
100%. Take the time on that, because like there might be some leaders listening to this thinking, well, how do I actually access what you're speaking to? Because there's a lot of reasons to not want to slow down and take this presence that we're saying is important. And it reminds me of something that someone in my audience once said to me, which really stayed with me after I gave a talk. And he said, the reason you know how to touch people's hearts is because you know what touches yours. And it had this impact on me, because it really brought home, the idea of authenticity essentially is what he's speaking to. As a leader though, because I just want to apply it to this conversation, if you haven't been touched by humanity, if you haven't truly been touched by the human spirit and its capability and its will and the power of that in another human being to bring to life what you want to see more of in the world, whatever that may be, you're not going to be able to cultivate, this culture that we're speaking to, because by no means are we suggesting a culture where everyone sings Kumbaya and nothing gets done. I'm actually trying to preface that what you will get done just like far exceeds anything that whipping of a horse could, ever achieve. And you're going to feel less alone, and you're going to truly have impacted not just your employees, but the family of your employees, the friends of your employees. All of that ripple can be created through the fostering of really real and true and loving styles of leadership.
I like that, the loving styles of leadership. And as I know, Nicole, and anyone who's been listening to this, I am an achiever, an overachiever to my own demise sometimes, right? This is part of the work I've done to untangle some of the tight wiring that my nurture and nature came with. And so I ride this fine line of, an open heart and compassionate leadership, and just being so humanely in touch with the people who I work with or work for me. And then at the same time, I get shit done. And I've run my own companies. I'm working for a scaling tech, Web3 innovative, like cutting edge technology company. We have things that we need to get done, like deadlines and deliverables and launches that are happening. So how do you balance these? And I would say every leader has to check in with like, okay, where are you in your own, grounded, centering sense of self? Are you someone who's, it's hard to know it when you're in it, but a little slanted in your own insecurities, right? In your own stories that are being created, in your own drama, because whatever your own drama is, that energetically is going to bleed into the team. And so I would say for a leader to work on themselves is the most important thing that affects the energy with how you show up to your team. And then it's infectious. And so if you're not meditating, if you're not journaling, if you're not going on your retreat, if you're not talking to your therapist, if you're not something, exercising the right way, if you're not really taking care of your mind, your body, and your spirit, you're not going to be able to do these things like compassionate leadership. So it is not I'm like starting to yell at you. I'm like, it is not selfish for the founder to take time to exercise and to eat right. And I've been there, and you think like, I have to do it all. It's like, no, you have to take care of yourself, because that is who that you're leading by example for doing that. And I think just like the and the common courtesies, I also think as a leader, like you set the tone, and sometimes we forget that. I absolutely set the tone with how you speak on Zoom meetings, how you send emails, how you even send texts and Slacks, like say please and thank you. Like just do that every time. Like be a please and thank you culture, acknowledge, like positive recognition, and then clear boundaries of when things need to get done by, clear deadlines. It's like, if you show up with this, way of graceful but clear and direct leadership.
Clarity is kindness.
Absolutely. And no beating around the bush, none of this like, unspoken awkwardness when there's conflict. Address the conflict, speak about it. You don't know how to do it, take a course in it, like figure out how to have compassionate communication and conflict resolution in your company. I mean, these are things like, as a leader, invest in developing your own skills in this area, because you're right, Nicole, people will go to battle for you if they appreciate you, if they love you as a human, not just as a boss who's like giving them their paycheck. Because you'll go to battle for them and they'll watch you do it for them.
That's right. You will go to battle for them. Let that land. Like if you're an entrepreneur that has investors that you're answerable to, who are you going to battle for? Because the script I had to flip was, when I'm in that dynamic, I'm there to vouch for my team. I'm not there. Yes. I'm not there to kiss their ass. I'm there to stand up for my team and say, this is where my team are at, and this is what we need. And if you want to back this vision, this is the reality of the situation. And then they feel protected. They feel looked after. They feel like that, like you will, fight for them and fight.
Absolutely.
What is, real and true. And then investors love that anyway, because they see that what you have going on actually is strong. There's strength in that.
Absolutely. And I'd say one other thought, you've triggered me thinking, investing in the people who work either with you or, in collaboration or work for you directly, any of them, just taking the time, but also being mindful as a founder, you have so many demands upon your time, but taking the time to invest in that individual as a person and whatever is going on in their unique life. Maybe they're married with 2 kids, and to have that caring relationship on a personal level is so important than like, oh, it's Jane Smith and she's getting the dev team, she's a project manager for the dev team. It's that personal note and that actual caring, because if you're listening to this, then you are a conscious person and you want to do conscious leadership, but you do actually care about your people. And just that personal touch, it goes such a long way. And doing that on a consistent basis, like it's just a feel good all around, to remember like, okay, we're all human. We've all got our real, personal lives going on, and we're all in this like unified mission together. And to encourage that humanity amongst the team, especially in this Zoom work day and age that we're in, it's so easy to lose the humanity. Yeah.
I so agree with that. This is what will build the world into its next, possibility, really. And I think that's a really like, it's a beautiful full circle, because where we began the conversation is what is the opportunity, and like reflecting, hearing what you have just shared. I don't think I could have come to these. I don't think the importance of this in leadership would have illuminated itself to me without last year. I needed that year. I'd traveled every week, 3-4 flights a week for 8 years, like that. There just would not have been the space to actually understand what I now know is bringing me the most purpose and joy in life. in how I show up in leadership, and like, let's all take that lesson from the past couple of years in how things have slowed down as we relaunch, ourselves into the world and our businesses and our missions and our purposes. Take these cultures with us, because there's a lot of fear that's being pushed down, from governments and authorities. So as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as community members, what are we going to do to create culture from the ground up? And to remember that actually there's ultimately the power in the people, and we do get to dictate that. We do get to design how that is going to look, no matter how hard governments try and just maintain cultures of fear and oppression.
I agree. And on that note, never, ever forget that every day, how you show up makes a difference. The energy that you bring to every single day, your meetings, your conversations, even if it's a day off, then the next work day, every day makes a difference, because we can get so frustrated and so downright angry and pissed at the world, turn on the news, or like accidentally, see a CNN, headline flash by. And once those moments happen, it's like, as a leader, it is with our energy, one leader at a time. It is the collective energy of all of us together, showing up consistently with a positive vibration as much as we can, that will actually make the shift for, call it, miracles to happen. And that has been our theme that we've been talking about, this event that we're hosting on December 12th, this 12-hour meditation. We were playing with, like, what would the title be? And we almost said it as a joke, on a whim, like, meditate for miracles. And then when you get into the actual, there's downright scientific studies that show what can happen with mindset shifts and collective mindset shifts while meditating. I mean, someone just shared, recently to us, a Greg Braden clip of like these studies that were done of the heart-centered, energetics versus like fear and anxiety. When you have open, loving heart, it's like medically been proven how healthy it is for people. And we don't know what the future looks like. All we can do is have faith that the energy that we bring to the table makes a difference, and to keep that. And you're right about this being a time of change. So often is used this caterpillar to butterfly metaphor, right? How many spiritual lessons use that? And that we're in this chrysalis moment, I believe, this past 2 years. And it's just like, feels like a long time to be in this chrysalis, but in the spectrum of the human species, this is like a blip, a glint on the radar. And there's such an opportunity of like, which way are the chips going to fall in this chrysalis moment, and what's going to, like, alchemy the negativity, the greed, the corruption, the game, like, how can we put so much positivity into this alchemic formula that it burns away the stuff that we know is holding consciousness back, we know is holding society and humanity back, to put more positivity into the cauldron, into the mix. The negativity will fall away, and that's what's going to end up rising up. We're just in the chrysalis moment. This one yoga teacher, when she tells that story, she says, think about what that poor, caterpillar was going through. It's like this whole cocoon gets spun, and the caterpillar literally turns into mush. Like, the entire body liquefies, its brain like spreads out into jelly. The thing, who knows what it's thinking, but I would imagine if that were me, you'd think, this is over, it's done. This is the darkest day is possible. Like, this is the end of me, I'm dying. Because that was a death. It was a death of that chapter of life as the caterpillar before the rebirth happens into the butterfly. And this is that opportunity that we were speaking about in the moment. Like, our species can come out a butterfly, we can. And it's a cycle that'll keep on happening. And with more conversations like these, that's how we feed that outcome that we desire to see. Amen.
So well said. Thank you, Chiyoko, for this incredible conversation. I feel like there's like three to 90 different paths still yet to be explored in the deconstruction of the topics we've touched on.
Always. This has been so much fun, Nicole. Thank you. And I love your deep inquiry and just your reflections. Soul sister forever, over many lifetimes and positive. And it's fun to do this. I don't even call it work. Like, we're having fun, we're playing, but it's so fun to like meet you in this lifetime and show up like this. And I just appreciate communities that you've built for years. And for anybody who's listened to this, like, you're not alone. We are in this together. Don't ever forget, we are all in this together. And so thank you for putting content like this out there in the world. It's so necessary.
Of course, this is my joy. This is like my second favorite thing to do, other than being in meetings with my team. So, so much love to you. And yeah, if listening and something is really appreciate you too, stood out, I'd love you to reach out to Chiyoko on wherever's best. We can put the relevant handles in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let her know. I think that's always a nice thing to do.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I look forward to many more of these conversations to come.
So many.
Awesome, Nicole.
You're the best.
All right. Thank you.
See
you soon. Bye, everybody. Thank you all.
Hey, family, if you loved this podcast and you want to stay connected to a tribe of heroes all around the world that are here to make the world a better place and act from their hero brain and act from a place of love, bringing their head and heart into cohesion, then I just want to invite you to jump in our Facebook group for free. Just search the Critical Mass Crew and you're going to find us there. We have tribe calls weekly, and these podcasts actually streamed into that group. So we have an additional 20-minute Q&A with the guests every single week that is exclusive to people in the group. So you'll also find the link in the show notes. See you in there.